Her world was built on absolute control, yet a single forbidden glance threatened to shatter it all. A yearning ignited, profound and terrifying, for something pure she believed forever lost. Hello, and a warm welcome to all you amazing viewers. I'm your storyteller, Morgan, and I hope this message finds you well. Before we dive into this incredible journey, if you crave stories about unexpected romance, the transformative power of real love, and how a single connection can rewrite destiny, you've come to the right place. If you want a soul-stirring, deeply emotional love story that lingers long after, stay until the very end. You won't want to miss a moment. It's going to be so worth it. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, and let's dive into this unforgettable story together. Chapter 1. Dawn arrived not with fanfare, but with the precise, silent unfurling of steel-gray light across the New York skyline. From the 62nd floor terrace of the Vance Tower penthouse, Elena Vance watched it happen. The city below, a conquered circuit board of glittering ambition and relentless industry, pulsed with a rhythm she commanded. Her domain, the chill air, sharp with impending winter, bit at exposed skin, but Elena stood immobile, a silhouette etched against the awakening metropolis. Her fingers, long and tapered, rested lightly on the cold railing. Control wasn't just a strategy, it was her atmosphere, her very breath. Inside, the penthouse was an extension of her will. Walls of polished concrete met floors of pale, veined marble. Furniture, all sharp angles and cool leather, obeyed strict geometric principles. No clutter, no superfluous color, only monochrome precision, and the scent of high-end vetiver cologne, lingering faintly in the air, a ghost of her presence. Her morning ritual was a silent ballet, the measured pour of obsidian black coffee into a bone-white cup, the crisp rustle of tailored silk pajamas replaced by the even crisper slide of a charcoal wool suit against her skin. Every movement was economical, purposeful. The only sound was the whisper of fabric and the distant muffled hum of the city far below. The drive to Vance Innovations headquarters was a seamless transition from one controlled environment to another. Her chauffeur, Anton, navigated the snarled arteries of Manhattan with preternatural calm, the partition between them a solid, sound-dampened wall. Elena reviewed holographic reports projected onto the tinted window, her expression unreadable. Success, immense and undeniable, was a fortress she'd built brick by ruthless brick. Emotions were vulnerabilities, connections were transaction points. Love, a chaotic variable she'd long ago excised from her equations. Her office, occupying the entire top floor of Vance Tower, was a temple to that philosophy. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a god's-eye view. Furniture was sparse, minimalist, designed for efficiency, not comfort. The air hummed with the low thrum of discreet technology and the scent of ozone and cold coffee. Her assistant, Miriam, a woman whose efficiency mirrored her own, materialized the moment Elena settled behind the vast, empty expanse of her desk. The final due diligence reports for the Kronos merger are compiled, Miss Vance, Miriam stated, placing a sleek tablet before her. Her voice was calibrated, professional. However, Mr. Harrington reiterated his concerns regarding the optics of finalizing such a significant legacy deal without demonstrable personal stability. His words, not mine. Harold Harrington, Kronos' octogenarian patriarch, was a relic obsessed with family values and settled leadership. His archaic stipulation, a visible, committed personal life for the CEO spearheading the merger, was an irritating pebble in her otherwise flawless path. Optics, she repeated, the word tasting faintly metallic, defined demonstrable stability in terms Harrington would find palatable. A fiancé, ma'am, Miriam replied without inflection, or at the very least, a serious long-term partner presented as such for the duration of the negotiations and the signing, 6 months minimum. A flicker of annoyance, quickly banked, tightened the line of Elena's jaw. The idea was absurd. Her personal life was a locked vault, its contents non-negotiable and irrelevant to her corporate prowess. Find a solution, Miriam. Discreet, efficient, temporary, unorthodox, but it might satisfy the requirement without actual entanglement. She tapped her own tablet. We require someone presentable, believable as a partner to you, capable of navigating high society events with a degree of grace, and above all, utterly discreet. Someone, unexpected, perhaps, not a known entity in our circles. Elena arched a perfect eyebrow. Go on. Highly talented, particularly in capturing nuanced human expression. He's done discreet archival work for several private collections. References are impeccable, quiet, professional, observant, possesses an innate goodness, and authenticity that reads well. Miriam projected a portfolio onto Elena's desk screen. The sketches were indeed remarkable, landscapes imbued with quiet melancholy, portraits that captured unguarded moments of profound humanity. 1. A close-up of an elderly woman's hands cradling a teacup radiated such tenderness, it felt intrusive to look at. Elena scanned the accompanying profile photo. Caucasian, lean build, tousled brown hair that looked perpetually windswept. His eyes, even in the static image, were a startling, clear blue, glacier melt, open, unjaded, soft, an artist. Her tone was dismissive. Harrington expects gravitas, not bohemian whimsy. He's unsuitable. His aesthetic sense is refined. Vance, Miriam countered gently. He understands composition, narrative. His presence wouldn't be jarring. It would be intriguing. An interesting counterpoint, and his discretion is paramount. He understands the nature of confidential contracts. She paused. He's also, according to a trusted mutual contact, genuinely reserved, intimately inexperienced, saving himself, they say, for something profoundly real. That level of untouched idealism could translate as believable devotion. The phrase untouched idealism struck Elena as dangerously naive, yet the counterpoint argument held a perverse logic. Someone unexpected, someone whose inherent goodness might disarm Harrington's old-fashioned scrutiny, someone who couldn't muddy the waters with genuine expectations. Set up an interview, Elena said, the decision coldly pragmatic. Tomorrow, 8 a.m. sharp, assess his suitability yourself first. If he possesses even an ounce of guile, dismiss him immediately. The next morning dawned brittle and bright. Leo Reed arrived precisely at 8, ushered in by Miriam. Elena observed him from her strategic position behind the desk, a general surveying new terrain. He carried a worn leather satchel slung over one shoulder, its surface scarred with use. His coat was simple, charcoal wool, decent quality but lacking the razor-sharp edge of her own tailoring. As he shrugged it off, handing it to Miriam, a faint, clean scent drifted across the room, cedarwood, graphite, and the crisp tang of cold air clinging to the fabric. It was entirely different from the sterile, controlled aromas of her world. "Miss Vance," Miriam announced. Leo Reed. Up close, the blue of his eyes was even more arresting, like looking into deep, clear water. They held no calculation, no sycophantic gleam, only a calm, open curiosity. His handshake, when he offered it across the desk, was firm, his skin cool and slightly rough. "Artist's hands. Thank you for seeing me, Miss Vance," he said. His voice was lower than she expected, unhurried, with a quiet resonance that seemed to vibrate subtly in the large silent room. Miriam outlined the unique nature of the project. "Discretion is non-negotiable," Elena stated, her tone clipped. "Absolute silence regarding the arrangement, its parameters, and anything you observe within the scope of this engagement. Breach it, and the consequences will be severe and immediate." She watched his face, searching for a flicker of apprehension or avarice. He met her gaze steadily. "Understood. Confidentiality clauses are standard in my archival work. My reputation relies on it." There was no flinch, only calm acceptance. "Your portfolio suggests an understanding of human nuance," Elena continued, shifting gears. "Miriam mentioned your skill in capturing quiet moments of truth." She infused the phrase with a hint of skepticism, or faint, genuine smile touched Leo's lips, softening his features. It transformed his face, lending it a warmth that felt incongruous in the austere office. "I suppose that's one way to put it. I'm drawn to the unguarded spaces, the way light falls on a face when someone thinks they're unobserved. The story hands tell when they're resting. It's not about grand gestures, but the small, real things people try to hide." His gaze drifted momentarily to her own hands, resting immobile on the desk, before returning to her eyes. "Truth often whispers, doesn't it, before it shouts?" Or it felt like he'd glanced behind the curtain of her meticulously constructed persona. She straightened infinitesimally. "This project requires performance, projecting a specific narrative. Can you convincingly portray deep affection, devotion?" He considered this, his head tilted slightly. "I can observe it. I can understand its language, the subtle shifts in posture, the focus in a gaze, the protective instinct. Portraying it depends on the context. Authenticity stems from understanding the core, even if the surface is a construct." He paused, those glacier blue eyes holding hers. "Is the affection entirely fictional, Miss Vance, or does the narrative require a seed of something recognizable?" The question was dangerously perceptive. It probed the very vulnerability she was hiring him to mask. A spark of irritation flared, sharp and defensive. "The narrative requires what I dictate it to require, Mr. Reed. Your role is to embody the construct convincingly for external observers, nothing more." Her voice was colder now, a sheet of ice. He didn't look away. "Understood. Convincing performance requires believable details, shared glances, casual touches, a sense of shared history, even if invented. It's a collaboration, wouldn't you say? Even a temporary one."
A ghost of that disarming smile returned. Think of it as co-creating a character study. We build the believable couple, brushstroke by brushstroke, brushstroke by brushstroke. The artistic metaphor, delivered with such calm assurance, was unexpectedly potent. It framed the distasteful charade as a creative challenge, something manageable, almost clinical. Elena found herself reassessing him. His quiet confidence wasn't arrogance, it was a deep-seated understanding of his craft, and his observation skills were clearly acute, dangerous perhaps, but potentially useful. There will be staged outings, she stated, shifting the focus. Gallery openings, charity galas, perhaps a weekend at Harrington's estate. You will be required to dress appropriately, converse appropriately, and maintain the facade at all times in public. Private interactions will remain strictly professional. She emphasized the last point. You will also document the process. His brow furrowed slightly. Document, visual records of our moments, for internal use only, to ensure visual consistency in our narrative, and to satisfy certain antiquated expectations of courtship from Mr. Harrington. It was a flimsy pretext, even to her own ears, but the idea of him observing her, translating her into lines on paper, held a strange, unsettling appeal she couldn't quite name. Consider it part of the commission, or ole, a slow nod. Documenting the constructed reality, an interesting meta-layer. He reached into his satchel, pulling out a simple, well-used sketchbook and a case of pencils. "May I?" he asked, gesturing subtly towards her. The request, so casually made, felt intensely intimate, to be studied, captured by those observant eyes and skilled hands. Elena fought the instinct to refuse, to shield herself. This was part of the job, part of the construct. "Proceed," she said, her voice betraying none of the sudden tightness in her chest. She picked up a tablet, pretending to review a document, acutely aware of his gaze settling on her profile. The silence stretched, thick and strangely charged. The only sounds were the faint hum of the building, and the soft rhythmic scratch-scratch of his pencil on paper. Elena focused on the glowing screen, but her awareness was entirely focused on the man seated a few feet away. She felt the weight of his observation like a physical touch. Did he note the precise angle of her jaw, the way she held her shoulders rigidly back, the slight tension at the corner of her mouth she usually masked so well? She became hyper-aware of herself, of the pulse beating a traitorous rhythm in her throat. Minutes ticked by. The sunlight shifted, a bright bar falling across the desk, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. It caught the gold flecks in Leo's stubble as he glanced down at his sketchbook, then back up at her. His gaze, when it met hers unexpectedly as she chanced to look, wasn't assessing or calculating. It was absorbed, intensely focused on the lines and planes of her face, the fall of light and shadow. There was a purity in his concentration that was utterly disarming. "You have a remarkably defined profile, Miss Vance," he remarked softly, his voice breaking the silence like a pebble dropped into still water. "Strong lines, like a Roman coin." His pencil moved again. Powerful yet classical. It wasn't flattery, it was an artistic observation, stated with detached appreciation. Yet, the words, the intense focus behind them, sent an unwelcome flush of heat creeping up Elena's neck. Powerful yet classical. The combination resonated in a way she didn't want to acknowledge. She tore her gaze away, turning sharply towards the panoramic window, the sprawling cityscape suddenly offering no solace. In the dark reflection of the glass, she caught the briefest glimpse of her own face, not the controlled CEO, but a woman caught off guard, a flicker of something raw and uncertain in her eyes before she ruthlessly smoothed it away. The fortress walls, impervious for so long, resonated with a new, unsettling frequency. The key, quiet and unassuming, had been inserted, and Elena Vance, the architect of her own impenetrable world, felt the first terrifying tremor deep within the foundations. The scratch of the pencil continued, a persistent counterpoint to the sudden chaotic drumming of her own heart. The charade had begun, but the most dangerous performance was the one unfolding silently within her own carefully guarded soul.
Chapter 2. The Chronos merger became the relentless drumbeat beneath the fragile melody of their charade. Elena Vance moved through her days with a heightened, almost brittle precision. Boardrooms felt like arenas where she fought not just for terms and percentages, but to maintain an impenetrable front against the disquiet Leo Reed had introduced. His presence was no longer just an inconvenient variable, it was a low-grade fever, a constant hum beneath the surface of her meticulously ordered world. Their first public test arrived, a preview gala at the austere Metropolis Gallery, showcasing brutalist sculptures Harrington inexplicably admired. Elena chose her armor carefully, a sheath dress of liquid emerald silk that cut a razor-sharp line from shoulder to knee, its cold elegance a stark contrast to the rough-hewn concrete and steel on display. Leo, guided by Miriam's impeccable taste and Elena's curt budget approval, arrived in a perfectly tailored deep navy suit. It clung to his lean frame with an understated grace that surprised her. He looked less like a hired artist and more like something else, something dangerously plausible. Miriam materialized beside them just inside the cavernous, echoing gallery space. "Remember," she murmured, her voice barely audible above the din of clinking glasses and pretentious murmurs, "the narrative is established affection, shared history, mutual respect. Mr. Harrington is near the colder mobile. He's watching." She melted back into the crowd. Elena felt Leo's hand settle lightly, almost tentatively, on the small of her back, a prescribed point of contact. Yet the heat of his palm, even through the layers of silk and the structured lining of her dress, branded her skin. It was a shockwave of sensation, radiating outwards, scrambling her internal calibration. She forced her spine straighter, her smile cool and practiced as she scanned the room. "Ready for our debut, partner?" Leo asked, his voice low beside her ear. The casual endearment, part of the script, felt illicit. His breath stirred the fine hairs at her temple. "Performance begins now, Mr. Reed," she replied, her tone clipped, aiming for professional detachment and landing somewhere brittle. "Try not to look like you're pricing the sculptures for scrap metal." A low chuckle rumbled in his chest, a warm vibration she felt where his hand still rested. "Wouldn't dream of it, Miss Vance, though that twisted rebar piece does look like it had a fight with a compactor." He steered her gently towards a cluster of people near a hulking abstract form. "Lead on. I'll follow your cues. Try to look besotted when you glance my way." "Besotted is outside my repertoire," she retorted, but she felt the corner of her mouth threaten to betray her. His quiet humor, so unexpected, was disarming. Adequate fondness will suffice. They navigated the crowd. Elena exchanged razor-sharp pleasantries with investors and sycophants, her mind split. One part recited lines, analyzed subtext, projected power. The other part remained acutely tethered to the warmth at her back, the solid presence beside her. She caught Leo fielding questions about the art with surprising erudition, deflecting inquiries about their relationship with charming vagueness. "Elena's passion is contagious," he said smoothly to a curious socialite, his gaze meeting Elena's with a warmth that felt disturbingly real. "She challenges perspectives, including mine on welded steel." He gave her hand, resting on his arm for photographers earlier, a subtle squeeze. The gesture was scripted, yet the pressure of his fingers sent another jolt through her. Later, near a towering, jagged piece Harrington was admiring, Leo leaned in, ostensibly to point out a detail. "The way you just eviscerated that hedge fund manager with a compliment about his tie," he murmured, his lips dangerously close to her ear, "was a masterpiece, far more compelling than anything here." His breath feathered her skin. "Cold fury looks devastating on you." Elena kept her gaze fixed on the sculpture, refusing to turn her head and risk brushing her cheek against his. Her pulse hammered against her ribs. "Flattery is unnecessary, Mr. Reed. Stick to the script." "Just an observation," he replied, pulling back slightly, though his hand remained a burning brand on her back, "like documenting the way the light catches the edge of your jaw when you're concentrating on evisceration. Pure, focused intensity." He paused. "Harrington's heading this way. Besotted look in 3, 2. Elena forced her expression to soften, turning towards Leo with what she hoped passed for affection. His eyes, glacier blue and startlingly close, held hers. There was amusement there, yes, but also a flicker of something deeper, something that looked unsettlingly like genuine admiration, for her performance, or for the fury he'd just witnessed. The intensity of his gaze, the proximity, the lingering heat of his touch, it was overwhelming. She felt a flush, hot and unwelcome, creep up her neck again. "Control, maintain control." "Elena, Leo," Harrington boomed, his ancient face creased in a smile that didn't reach his shrewd eyes. "Marvelous to see the two of you. The gallery suits you. Such vibrancy." His gaze lingered on Leo's hand resting possessively on Elena's back. "Tell me, Leo, how does one capture the attention of the most formidable woman in the city? What's your secret?" Leo didn't miss a beat. He smiled, warm and open, his thumb making an infinitesimal, circular movement against the silk covering Elena's spine. She nearly gasped. "Patience, sir," Leo said easily, and appreciating the strength, not being intimidated by it. "Elena doesn't suffer fools, but she has a remarkable capacity for seeing the potential in unexpected things." His gaze swept briefly over the brutalist sculpture, and people. Harrington chuckled, appeased for the moment. Elena felt like she was holding her breath. Leo's words, delivered with such effortless conviction, resonated far too deeply, appreciating the strength, seeing potential in unexpected things. Was that part of the script Miriam provided,
Or was it Leo Reed, observing her again, seeing past the CEO to something else? The thought was terrifying. The fever didn't break after the gala, it intensified. Elena fought it with the only weapons she knew, immersion in work and iron discipline. She buried herself in spreadsheets and strategy sessions, pushing her team harder, her voice sharper, her expectations more exacting. Yet Leo's presence was an inescapable undercurrent. Briefings in her office became exquisite torture. He would sit near the window, sketchbook open, ostensibly documenting their courtship for Harrington's benefit. The soft scratch of his pencil was a constant, intimate counterpoint to the sterile hum of technology. Elena would dictate terms, discuss merger clauses, her words crisp and efficient, while her awareness fractured. She noticed the way the afternoon light gilded the fine hairs on his forearm where his shirt sleeve was rolled up. She registered the faint, clean scent of cedar soap and graphite that seemed to cling to him, a scent that now invaded her pristine, vetiver-scented sanctuary. She became hyper-aware of his posture, relaxed yet attentive, and the way a small furrow appeared between his brows when he concentrated, the faint pulse visible at his temple. One afternoon, reviewing acquisition targets, she paused mid-sentence. Leo wasn't sketching a scene, he was sketching her. His gaze was fixed on her profile as she stared at a holographic projection, his hand moving with swift, sure strokes. The intensity of his focus, the quiet absorption in his task, felt like a physical touch. Heat bloomed across her cheekbones. "Mr. Reed," she said, her voice tighter than intended, "the documentation is meant to capture shared moments, not individual surveillance." He didn't look up immediately, finishing a line with deliberate care. Then he met her gaze, his eyes clear and unapologetic. "Shared moments stem from individuals, Miss Vance. Understanding the parts informs the whole." He held up the sketchbook slightly. She saw a rendering of herself in profile, brow slightly furrowed, lips pressed in concentration. He'd captured the sharp intelligence, the contained energy, but also a vulnerability in the set of her jaw she never allowed anyone to see. It was both an invasion and a revelation. "You have a fascinating architecture," he added quietly, "strength and complexity." The observation, so casually profound, stole her breath. Complexity. He saw it. He dared to name it. She turned abruptly back to the hologram, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. "Focus on the merger parameters, Mr. Reed, not my architecture." The sketches began to appear like ghosts in her environment. He left one on a side table after a meeting, a quick study of their hands resting near each other on the conference table during a tense negotiation. The contrast was stark, her manicured nails and gold bangle against the roughness of his artist's fingers, the faint smudge of graphite near his knuckle. She didn't throw it away. She found herself staring at it later, the unspoken tension between the two drawn hands palpable. Another day, pinned unobtrusively near her monitor, was a small, vibrant sketch of a single wildflower, a purple coneflower bursting with life against a stark background. It was utterly incongruous in her minimalist office, a splash of defiant color and wildness. She left it there. Its presence was a quiet rebellion against the sterility of her world, a persistent reminder of him. The breaking point came before a crucial dinner at Harrington's Park Avenue penthouse. Elena stood before the floor-to-ceiling mirror in her dressing room, adjusting the clasp of a heavy platinum necklace, a cold, perfect artifact. The intricate mechanism defied her. Her fingers, usually so deft, fumbled, frustration mounting. The necklace hung precariously, threatening to slip. "Allow me." He'd arrived early, impeccably dressed in a tuxedo that emphasized his lean frame, his hair tamed but still hinting at its natural disarray. He'd been waiting in the living area. She hadn't heard him approach. Her breath hitched audibly. She didn't turn, couldn't trust her voice. After a beat, she gave a stiff nod. Still facing the mirror, she saw his reflection approach, a tall, calm presence behind her. He stepped close, his body heat radiating against her back. The clean cedar scent of him enveloped her. His hands, cool and surprisingly deft, reached for the stubborn clasp at her nape. His fingers brushed the sensitive skin, where her neck met her shoulder. A jolt of pure sensation, electric and shocking, shot down her spine. She froze, every muscle locking. His touch was light, professional, focused solely on the task, yet the intimacy of the moment was devastating. She felt the warmth of his knuckles graze the top vertebrae of her spine. She felt his breath stir the tiny hairs at her hairline. Her own breath caught, suspended, as the seconds stretched. In the mirror, her reflection showed wide, dark eyes, lips slightly parted, an expression of stunned vulnerability she barely recognized. The clasp clicked softly into place. His hands lingered for a fraction of a second longer than necessary, resting lightly on her shoulders. His gaze in the mirror met hers, intense, searching. There was no guile there, only a quiet concern, a dawning awareness of the current arcing between them. He saw her reaction. He felt it. "All secure," he murmured, his voice low and rough. He stepped back instantly, putting a crucial few inches of space between them. The sudden absence of his warmth felt like a Elena swallowed, forcing air into her lungs. The platinum felt cold and heavy against her skin, a stark contrast to the lingering heat where his fingers had touched. "Thank you," she managed. The words clipped, refusing to meet his eyes in the mirror, focusing instead on straightening an invisible wrinkle in her midnight blue gown. Her hands trembled slightly. That tiny necessary touch had shattered something fundamental. The carefully constructed barrier between professional necessity and dangerous, forbidden desire lay in splinters. He remained calm, pure, yet now undeniably aware. The fortress was under siege, and the enemy was not just her own treacherous body, but the terrifying vulnerability reflected in his too perceptive blue eyes. The siege continued, deepening into a shared silent agony. Late nights became their unintended confessional. After grueling days navigating the treacherous waters of the merger, Elena would often retreat to her study, seeking solace in work that now offered little refuge. Leo, claiming the need for the right light or quiet to sketch, would often be there too, settled in an armchair near the window, sketchbook open. One such night, a fierce spring storm lashed against the penthouse windows. Rain streamed down the glass like liquid obsidian, blurring the city lights into smears of color. The only illumination came from the green-shaded banker's lamp on Elena's desk and a small reading light beside Leo's chair. The room was a pool of quiet amidst the drumming rain. Elena pored over contracts, the words blurring before her tired eyes. Leo's pencil moved in slow, deliberate strokes across the paper. The silence wasn't empty. It was thick, charged with everything left unsaid, with the memory of his touch on her skin. She felt his gaze, not the detached observation of the artist, but a heavy, tangible weight. She looked up, drawn by the force of it. He wasn't looking at her profile or her hands. He was looking directly at her. His eyes, in the dim light, were dark pools of blue, intense and unguarded. There was no pretense now, no artistic distance. In his gaze she saw the reflection of her own turmoil, the confusion, the raw, unwelcome attraction, the dawning, terrifying realization that this was no longer just a charade. It was a mirror held up to her unraveling soul. He didn't look away. He held her gaze, his pencil stilled in his hand. The air crackled, alive with the storm outside and the silent storm within. His expression was serious, searching, stripped bare of its usual calm. She saw the question there, the same question screaming in her own veins. What is happening to us? She was the one who broke first. She looked down, her throat tight, focusing blindly on the contract before her. The scratch of his pencil didn't resume. The silence stretched, heavier than before, filled only by the drumming rain and the frantic beating of her own heart. The unspoken tension was a living thing in the room, coiling around them. His purity wasn't oblivious anymore. It was a beacon illuminating the dangerous depths they were both navigating. The charade was crumbling, brick by agonizing brick, revealing the terrifying, beautiful ruin beneath. The descent into forbidden observation had become a mutual freefall, and the ground was rushing up to meet them with terrifying speed. The only question left was who would dare to speak before they hit.
Chapter 3. The Kronos merger loomed like a thunderhead, darkening every horizon. Negotiations reached a fever pitch, days bleeding into nights filled with legal jargon, veiled threats, and the constant corrosive pressure to project an image of serene, coupled stability. Elena Vance moved through it all like a blade honed too fine, her control stretched to a brittle translucence. Every interaction with Leo Reed was a live wire against raw nerves, the carefully maintained facade cracking under the weight of unspoken desire. The air between them crackled with a voltage that made the sterile boardrooms feel like pressure chambers. The breaking point arrived at Harrington's annual Founders Gala, a spectacle of old money and older pretensions held in the gilded cavern of the Metropolitan Club ballroom. Elena wore armor of black velvet, the dress severe and sculpted, its only concession to adornment a collar of icy diamonds that felt like shackles. Leo, beside her in a tuxedo that seemed to absorb the dim chandelier light, was a study in contained tension. His usual calm observation felt charged now, his gaze lingering a fraction too long, his presence beside her a constant magnetic pull. They navigated the sea of silk and self-importance, Leo's hand a familiar burning brand on the small of her back. Elena traded barbs disguised as pleasantries, her smile a frozen mask. Leo played his part with unnerving grace, deflecting probing questions about their whirlwind romance with charming deflections that felt less like performance and more like shared secrets. "Elena keeps me on my toes," he told a diamond-laden matron, his thumb tracing an unconscious circle on Elena's spine through the velvet. "Predictability bores her. Fortunately, I specialize in the unexpected." He shot Elena a look that was pure, unscripted heat. She felt a flush climb her throat, her carefully constructed composure wobbling. "Specializing in chaos, Mr. Reed," she murmured, her voice tight, as they moved towards the bar. "A dangerous vocation." Only when the subject is worth the risk, he countered smoothly, his breath warm against her temple as he leaned in to order her mineral water. And some subjects. His gaze swept over her profile, lingering on the diamond collar at her throat, demand a certain audacity. The double entendre hung in the air, thick and undeniable. The air grew thick with cigar smoke and avarice. Across the room, Marcus Thorne, the reptilian CEO of a rival conglomerate who'd lost the Kronos bid, watched them with venomous eyes. He detached himself from his sycophants and slithered towards them, a predatory smile plastered on his face. "Elena, Leo," Thorne boomed, his voice slick with false bonhomie. "Still playing house, I see. Quite the convincing tableau. Tell me, Leo," he continued, his gaze dripping with condescension as he looked Leo up and down, "how does one land the Ice Queen? Did you promise to sketch her soul, or is it simply convenient timing?" He winked, a grotesque gesture, a temporary solution to a perception problem. Elena felt the insult land like a physical blow. Ice Queen, convenient, temporary. The words echoed the fears she battled daily. Her spine went rigid, her knuckles white around her water glass. She opened her mouth, ready to unleash a retort that would flay him alive, but before she could speak, Leo's hand tightened possessively on her waist, pulling her infinitesimally closer. His other hand found hers where it rested limply at her side, threading his fingers through hers in a gesture that was startlingly intimate, startlingly real. "Marcus," Leo said, his voice low but carrying an unexpected edge of steel. The easy charm was gone, replaced by a quiet, protective intensity that vibrated through Elena's frame. Elena's strength isn't ice, it's forged steel, and landing her, he turned his head, his glacier blue eyes locking onto Elena's with a look of such fierce, unfeigned admiration, it stole her breath. That wasn't landing, that was recognizing a force of nature, and having the sheer dumb luck to be standing where she chose to shine. He lifted their joined hands slightly, his thumb brushing over her knuckles in a deliberate, possessive caress. Convenience has nothing to do with it, only profound respect, and something far more compelling. The words, the touch, the look. It wasn't scripted. It wasn't for Harrington or the gawking crowd. It was raw, elemental, a shield thrown up against the ugliness directed at her. The possessive pressure of his fingers intertwined with hers, the brush of his thumb. It wasn't reassurance. It was acclaiming. It was an anchor thrown into the storm of her fury and humiliation, and it snapped the last fraying thread of Elena Vance's legendary control. A tremor ran through her, deep and seismic. The room blurred, the cacophony of voices fading to a dull roar. All she felt was the burning pressure of Leo's hand in hers, the solid heat of his body beside her, and the terrifying, liberating realization that the fortress walls were dust. She didn't hear Thorne's spluttered response. She barely registered Harrington's concerned gaze. The only reality was Leo, his eyes holding hers, reflecting back the cataclysm he'd just unleashed within her. Respect, something far more compelling. The truth of it resonated in her bones, undeniable, terrifying, and utterly intoxicating. The drive back to the penthouse was a descent into a charged, silent inferno. Rain lashed against the Bentley's windows, blurring the city lights into smears of gold and crimson, mirroring the chaos within the car. Anton drove with preternatural calm, the partition firmly up. Elena sat rigidly in the plush leather, staring unseeing at the storm. The phantom sensations consumed her, the heat of Leo's hand still branded on her waist, the echo of his thumb brushing her knuckles, the intensity in his eyes as he defended her, claimed her. Leo sat beside her, equally silent, his profile a stark silhouette against the wet glass. The air crackled with unspent energy, thick with everything that had been said and everything that screamed to be acknowledged. The distance of mere inches between them felt like an impossible gulf and a magnetic pull simultaneously. She could smell the rain on his wool coat, the faint cedar beneath, mixed with the scent of her own expensive perfume turned suddenly cloying. Her skin felt hypersensitive, every brush of velvet against her arms a torment. He shifted slightly, the leather sighing. "Thorns and ass," he said, his voice rough, breaking the suffocating silence. It wasn't an apology or an explanation. It was a simple shared truth. Hyperbixta. "He is," Elena managed, her own voice sounding strange, tight, but he wasn't entirely wrong. The admission scraped her throat. About the convenience. Leo turned his head. She felt his gaze, heavy and intense, even in the dim light. He was entirely wrong, he stated, quiet conviction vibrating in the words. About everything that matters. He paused. The rain drummed a frantic rhythm on the roof. That wasn't performance, Elena. Not back there. The use of her first name, unprompted, unscripted, landed like a physical touch. She finally turned her head, meeting his eyes.
They were dark pools in the gloom, reflecting the fleeting streetlights, holding an ocean of unspoken feeling. The raw honesty in them, the absence of any artifice, was devastating. The carefully constructed walls around her heart didn't just crack, they imploded. "No," she whispered, the word barely audible over the storm. It wasn't. The admission hung between them, fragile and monumental. The air became almost too thick to breathe. She saw his chest rise and fall with a sharp intake of breath. His hand, resting on the seat beside hers, clenched slightly. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was deafening, filled with the roaring of the rain and the thunderous pounding of her own heart. The gulf between them vanished in the shared recognition of the precipice they stood upon. The Bentley glided to a stop beneath the porte-cochere of her building. Anton opened her door, holding an umbrella against the downpour. The cold, wet air hit her like a slap as she stepped out. Leo followed, dismissing Anton with a curt nod she didn't see, his focus entirely on her. The doorman was absent, the vast marble lobby eerily empty at this late hour. Rainwater dripped from their coats, pooling on the polished floor. The usually imposing space felt intimate, charged, reduced to just the two of them, and the drumming symphony of the storm outside. Elena stood frozen in the center of the cavernous foyer, dripping, the diamond collar cold and heavy at her throat. The controlled CEO was gone. In her place stood a woman utterly exposed, her carefully constructed world in ruins around her. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her body trembling not from cold but from the sheer terrifying force of the emotions tearing through her. Desire, vulnerability, a longing so profound it felt like grief. She looked at Leo. He stood a few feet away, rainwater plastering his dark hair to his forehead, his tuxedo shirt clinging transparently to the lean planes of his chest and shoulders. Water traced paths down his face, his eyes impossibly blue even in the dim lobby light, held hers. There was no calm observation now, no artistic detachment, there was only raw, echoing need, a mirror to her own unraveling. He looked at her not as the CEO, not as a client, but as Elena, a woman standing drenched and trembling in the wreckage of her own defenses. The sight of him equally undone, equally consumed, was the final detonation. No words, none were possible, none were needed. The silence screamed louder than the storm. Elena took a step towards him, then another. The sound of her heels on the wet marble echoed like gunshots in the vast silence, or perhaps it was the frantic beating of her own heart. She closed the distance. Rainwater dripped from her hair, mingling with the moisture on his face. She reached out, her hand trembling violently, not as the powerful Elena Vance, but as a woman stripped bare. Her fingertips touched his rain-cooled cheek. It was an offering, a surrender, a question. He leaned into her touch instantly, his eyes closing for a fleeting second, a soft, ragged sigh escaping him. It was an answer. The last vestige of resistance evaporated from his posture. He reached up, his own hand rough and cool from the rain, covering hers where it rested against his cheek, holding it there. The contact was electric. It shattered the final barrier. Elena surged forward, propelled by a force older than reason, stronger than control. Her other hand came up, tangling in the wet silk of his hair. She pulled his face down to hers. The kiss wasn't gentle, it wasn't tentative, it was a collision, a conflagration, a desperate claiming, and a profound yielding all at once. It was fire meeting rain, fury meeting tenderness, months of excruciating tension exploding into a single devastating point of contact. His lips were cool from the rain, but ignited instantly against hers, fierce and demanding. She met him with equal ferocity, her fingers tightening in his hair, pulling him closer, desperate to erase every inch of space between them. His arms locked around her waist, hauling her against him with a possessiveness that bordered on desperation, yet held a breathtaking reverence. The soaked velvet of her dress crushed against his wet shirt, the cold forgotten, consumed by the furnace heat building between them. The diamond collar dug into her throat, a final symbol of the cold artifice she was shedding. With a frustrated gasp, she tore her mouth from his just long enough to fumble with the clasp. It resisted. Leo's hands joined hers, his fingers deft despite their trembling, and the cold platinum and diamonds clattered unheeded to the marble floor, a discarded crown. His mouth found hers again, deeper, hungrier. The kiss was a language more profound than words could ever be, a confession, a absolution, a desperate mapping of territory both familiar and terrifyingly new. His hands slid up her back, under the heavy wet velvet, seeking the warmth of her skin, tracing the delicate ridge of her spine through the thin silk of her slip. A moan escaped her, swallowed by his kiss, a sound of surrender and discovery. The fortress was breached. The sanctuary wasn't a place, it was the man holding her, kissing her as if she were air and he was drowning. The carefully constructed world of control lay in ruins around them, washed away by the storm and the overwhelming tide of a desire that had finally, irrevocably won. The scratch of the pencil, the sterile scent of vetiver, the cold calculations, all dissolved in the heat of his mouth, the strength of his arms, the shocking beautiful ruin of their surrender. The only sound now was the drumming rain, their ragged breaths, and the silent seismic shift as two souls collided, shattering the old order and forging a terrifying, exhilarating new one in the rain-slicked silence of the abandoned foyer. The performance was over. The real, devastatingly beautiful story had just begun.
Chapter 4. The world didn't end when the fortress fell. It transformed. The sterile, echoing expanse of Elena Vance's penthouse, once a monument to control, became the crucible where something entirely new and terrifyingly fragile was forged. The morning after the storm, after the shattering kiss in the rain-slicked lobby, dawn didn't reveal ruin, but a landscape irrevocably altered. Elena woke not to the cold precision of her alarm, but to the unfamiliar weight of an arm draped possessively across her waist, the warmth of a body curved against her back, and the soft rhythmic puff of breath against the nape of her neck. Leo. The reality slammed into her with the force of the previous night's storm. Panic, sharp and cold, warred with a profound, bone-deep sense of rightness. She lay perfectly still, cataloguing sensations. The rough texture of the sheets, hers, yet suddenly alien, the faint scent of cedar and male skin mingling with her own expensive linen spray, the solid wall of heat at her back. Control, her lifelong armor, lay discarded like the diamond collar on the foyer floor. Yet, instead of vulnerability, she felt anchored, terrified, yes, but anchored. A low hum vibrated in his chest, resonating against her spine. Morning, his voice was rough with sleep, a warm rumble against her skin. His lips brushed the sensitive spot where her shoulder met her neck, sending a fresh cascade of sparks through her. Regrets? The question was simple, direct, devoid of artifice. It demanded an equal honesty. Elena turned slowly within the circle of his arm, meeting eyes the color of a clear winter sky, still hazy with sleep, but intensely focused on her. She saw no triumph, only a quiet, searching vulnerability that mirrored her own. The panic receded, replaced by a wave of tenderness so fierce it stole her breath. She traced the line of his jaw, rough with morning stubble, a tactile confirmation of reality. None, she breathed, the word feeling like a vow in the hushed intimacy of the sun-drenched room. Only astonishment. A slow, devastating smile spread across his face, transforming it. He captured her wandering hand, pressing a kiss to her palm, the gesture heartbreakingly tender. Astonishment is mutual, Miss Vance. His eyes held hers. Though the view this morning significantly outclasses the city skyline, flirtation stripped of pretense was a new intoxicating language. Flattery before coffee, Mr. Reed. A bold strategy. She tried for her usual dryness, but it emerged softened, almost playful. Observation, he corrected, leaning in to brush his lips against hers, a soft lingering promise. Pure, unadulterated appreciation. His hand slid down her spine, pulling her closer until their bodies aligned, heat flaring instantly. Though coffee is a compelling argument, later, the later stretched into hours. Time dissolved, the Chronos merger, the outside world receded to a distant, unimportant hum. They existed in a suspended reality of tangled sheets, whispered discoveries, and profound wordless communication. Leo's touch was a revelation, reverent yet possessive, exploring the landscape of her body with an artist's curiosity and a lover's devotion. He traced the faint scar on her knee from a childhood fall, the curve of her hip, the sensitive dip at the base of her throat, mapping her not just physically, but emotionally. Elena, in turn, discovered the strength in his lean frame, the texture of calloused artist's hands against her skin, the way his breath hitched when she touched him. Their intimacy was slow, profound, a sacred exploration. His inexperience wasn't awkwardness. It was a heartbreaking trust, a gift given with wide-open, glacier-blue eyes. Her surrender wasn't defeat. It was a baptism, a shedding of layers she hadn't realized were suffocating her. Afterwards, wrapped in the silence punctuated only by their slowing breaths, Leo propped himself on an elbow, gazing down at her. Sunlight streamed through the window, gilding his hair, highlighting the intensity in his eyes. He didn't speak, just traced the line of her collarbone with a feather-light touch. The silence wasn't empty, it was resonant, filled with the echoes of their shared vulnerability, a language more profound than words. "I should sketch this," he murmured, his voice thick with emotion. "The light on your skin, the peace." He shook his head slightly, a wonder-struck smile touching his lips. "But some moments are just for keeping." The penthouse itself began to change, reflecting the seismic shift within its walls. Leo's presence was no longer an intrusion, it was an infusion. His worn leather satchel sat beside her pristine Prada briefcase near the door.
His sketchbooks, once confined to a corner during briefings, now lay open on the coffee table, vibrant charcoal landscapes and intimate fleeting studies of Elena, reading, frowning at a tablet, laughing softly at something he'd said, mingling with financial reports. A single vibrant wildflower sketch, similar to the one he'd pinned near her monitor weeks ago, now occupied a small frame on her desk, a defiant splash of color against the monochrome. One morning, Elena emerged from her dressing room to find Leo at the vast kitchen island, barefoot, wearing low-slung sweatpants and nothing else, his torso a landscape of lean muscle, gilded by the morning sun. He was intently focused on pouring coffee from her sleek, complicated machine. The sight, the sheer unself-conscious domesticity of him in her sterile kitchen, stopped her in her tracks. He looked up, caught her staring, and a slow, knowing grin spread across his face. "See something you like, CEO," he quipped, pushing a steaming mug towards her. The scent of rich coffee filled the air, replacing the sterile vetiver. "Merely assessing the structural integrity of my espresso machine in untrained hands," she retorted, walking towards him, unable to suppress her own smile. She accepted the mug, letting her fingers brush his. The spark was instant, familiar now, but no less potent. Though the view is adequately distracting, he pulled her close, his hands settling on her hips, clad in tailored silk trousers. "Adequately," he murmured, dipping his head to nuzzle the sensitive spot below her ear. "I must be losing my touch." His lips traced a path along her jaw. "Perhaps I need to practice my presentation," she shivered, tilting her head to give him better access. "Presentation requires refinement, Mr. Reed. Focus is key." Her voice was breathless. His laugh was a warm vibration against her skin. "My focus, Miss Vance, is entirely on the subject matter." He pulled back slightly, his eyes serious despite the playful banter. "Always. At Vance Innovations." The air shifted. Elena still commanded, still made decisive, sometimes ruthless choices, but a new undercurrent flowed beneath the surface. She listened more. She delegated, trusting her capable team. Miriam watched the change with barely concealed satisfaction. Laughter, genuine and unexpected, sometimes echoed from her office. She wore softer fabrics, allowed her hair down in loose waves instead of the severe chignon. Decisions regarding the Kronos merger, once purely strategic, now held an unexpected thread of empathy, a consideration for the human impact Harrington valued. She moved through the gleaming corridors not just as a conqueror, but as a leader who understood the landscape she commanded, included living, breathing people. The inevitable moment arrived. The Kronos deal was finalized, the papers signed in Harrington's wood-paneled office. The old man beamed, shaking both their hands vigorously. "Knew you two had the right stuff. Stability, vision, and genuine affection." He winked at Leo. "Told you she wasn't all ice, son." Later, back in her office, the celebratory champagne untouched, Elena looked at Leo. The charade was officially over. The practical need for the facade had dissolved with the ink on the contracts. The silence stretched, filled with the unspoken question. Leo leaned against her desk, watching her. "So," he said, his voice quiet, "the contract is fulfilled." The performance concluded. He stated it as fact, but his eyes held a question, a vulnerability he didn't try to hide. Elena crossed the space between them in 2 strides. She didn't hesitate. She cupped his face in her hands, forcing him to meet her gaze. "The performance ended in the lobby, Leo," she said, her voice low and fierce. "What started there?" She searched his eyes, finding her own certainty reflected back. "That's the only reality I want." She kissed him, not with the desperation of the storm, but with a deep, claiming certainty. "No more contracts, just us." He kissed her back, his arms wrapping around her, pulling her flush against him. "Just us," he echoed against her lips, the words a vow, a sanctuary found. Leo, too, was reshaped by the fire, his quiet strength solidified. He worked in the sun-drenched corner of the penthouse she'd unofficially designated as his studio, his art infused with a newfound passion and depth. Bold strokes of color replaced some of the quiet melancholy, reflecting the intensity of his emotions. He navigated her world, not as an outsider, but as her anchor, his inherent idealism tempered but not broken by the fierce reality of loving her. He learned the language of corporate warfare, not to fight but to understand her battles, offering silent support or sharp, insightful observations when asked. "Your rival's proposal," he'd say, looking up from a sketch of the Hudson at dusk. "It hinges on underestimating the union reps, like ignoring the undertow in calm water." His artist's eye saw patterns others missed. Months bled into a rhythm that felt both astonishingly new and deeply familiar. One crisp autumn evening, Elena stood on the penthouse terrace, wrapped not in power silhouette tailoring, but in one of Leo's oversized, impossibly soft gray sweaters. The sleeves engulfed her hands, the wool smelling faintly of cedar and turpentine. Below, the city lights twinkled, no longer just a conquered circuit board, but a tapestry of life, possibility, and their shared future. The air held the sharp tang of fallen leaves and distant promise. She heard the sliding door open behind her, felt the familiar warmth before he even touched her. Leo stepped up, slipping his arms around her waist from behind, pulling her back against the solid wall of his chest. He rested his chin on the top of her head, his breath warm in her hair. His hands settled possessively, comfortably, over hers where they rested low on her stomach beneath the soft wool. "Stealing my sweaters again, Vance." His voice was a warm rumble against her ear, laced with amusement and deep affection. "I thought corporate raiders had stricter policies on intellectual property." She leaned back into him, a sigh of pure contentment escaping her. "Consider it tribute, Reed, payment for services rendered." She tilted her head back to look up at him, catching the playful glint in his blue eyes in the twilight. Specifically, services involving unparalleled warmth and structural support. He grinned, dipping his head to brush his lips against hers. "Structural support, huh? Is that what we're calling it now?" His hand slid lower, splaying possessively over her abdomen beneath the sweater, his touch warm and intimate. "Seems like a critical function requires reinforcement lately." A slow smile spread across Elena's face, warm and secretive. She covered his hand with hers, lacing their fingers together over the subtle, nascent curve only they knew existed. The life growing within her, the ultimate symbol of surrender, trust, and a love that had consumed and rebuilt her world. "The most critical project yet," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion, "requiring significant, ongoing investment." Rouleau's arms tightened around her, his breath catching. He turned her gently within his embrace, his gaze dropping to where their joined hands rested. The playful banter faded, replaced by a look of awe so profound it stole Elena's breath. He looked up, meeting her eyes, his own shimmering. "A masterpiece," he whispered, his voice rough.
He leaned down, capturing her lips in a kiss that was tender, reverent, and filled with a love as deep and vast as the city stretching below them. Our masterpiece. They stood entwined on the terrace, silhouetted against the glittering skyline. No grand declarations shattered the peaceful evening. The silence between them was profound, resonant, a perfect harmonious chord replacing the lonely echo of control that had once defined Elena's existence. The fire still burned, banked now to an eternal transformative warmth in their shared gaze, in the protective circle of his arms, in the life cradled between them. The scent of coffee and cedar, and the faint, clean promise of rain hung in the air. Below, the city hummed its endless song. Above, stars began to prick the darkening velvet sky. Elena closed her eyes, leaning fully into Leo's strength, feeling the steady beat of his heart against her back, the warmth of his hands anchoring her to the earth, and to this impossible, beautiful reality. The sanctuary wasn't steel and glass. It was the man whose quiet purity had disarmed her fortress, whose love had consumed the ice and revealed the vibrant, enduring strength beneath. In the silent communion of their embrace, under the watchful stars, Elena Vance finally understood. She hadn't lost control. She had found her true north,